Dan, mate, what a fucking week.
It's been I've been in Bitcoin 9 years now, and this was by far one of the most. I keep thinking that it's going to cool down at some point, but no, Bitcoin is always full of drama and prices dropping over 50%, and a lot of drama with mining. It was nuts.
Dude, I didn't see a 50%, well, 51% I think was the biggest on one exchange. I did not see that come in. It's funny actually because I'm in it less time than you. I'm in it 4 years, so I've done a cycle, so it's easier this time, right? Whereas like my first cycle, I was like, shit, I better sell. Everything's gonna die. And then, but this one, I kind of like, oh, for fuck's sake, but I'll put up with it. But it's just there's a lot of weird stuff going on at the moment. I'm by the way, we were meant to talk about something else. I don't have any agenda today. I've got no written questions. I just want to shoot the shit with you.
Let's do it, man.
So let's talk about the Mining Council. I was on a Twitter Spaces chat with Nick Carter and a bunch of people before we got on this talking about it. I typically shot from the hip on Twitter, threw out some fucking hand grenades, made it clear that I think what I think of Elon Musk and secret meetings and such. But what I noticed was there was actually a real split on this. The plebs were obviously the cyber hornets were like, fuck this, this is bullshit. But there were some more reasonable voices. Nick Carter wrote a considered couple of tweets about it. I saw Amanda from Galaxy Digital Mining Operation write something considered about it. And I've noticed a number of people say this isn't such a big issue. Actually, reporting this data is important. I think having a range of voices is good. Sorry, I'm going on a bit of a ramble to start here, but I think having a range of voices is good, Dan. I think it's good to have the cyber hornets reining people in, and I also think it's good to have the more kind of what should we say, liberal voices with regards to this, because it's like the push and pull of politics, right? You find consensus in the middle, but how do you take it on in? What was your response to the Mining Council?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is never short of drama. There's always governance conversations, decentralization, threats, FUD that ebb and flow on a weekly basis. Certainly, after 9 years of it, it's it's. I definitely have a few extra
Tiring.
gray hairs, and I'm looking forward to Miami. I need a couple whiskeys. I think we all do. But yeah, with Bitcoin mining and China FUD. So first and foremost, miners don't control Bitcoin. So I think that's the fundamental point I want to hammer home here. Miners don't control Bitcoin. That fundamentally we do not have to worry about. Miners are the paid guards of the Bitcoin ledger. That's I think a more simplistic way to think about it, that they're incentivized to behave properly, but they do not control Bitcoin. So I think that is a big concern for folks who are new. They might think that miners control Bitcoin, which is not true. Now, when it
Well, should we
comes
explain?
to
Should we explain why though? Just so people might not, because they might not understand.
yeah, so miners are paid to structure transactions appropriately or in the right sequence. They're paid and they're incentivized, and their payment is in Bitcoin. And they've bought machines and they've put electricity through the machines to earn that block reward, which is their Bitcoin reward. And they're rewarded for behaving properly and ordering transactions in the right sequential manner. And so, if miners were to behave improperly, they would damage their future rewards, their future cash flows, because they would hurt the value of Bitcoin. That's the game theory that protects the Bitcoin ledger. And that's the role that miners play in that. Now, who controls Bitcoin? Bitcoin is controlled by the community. It's sort of a standoff between Bitcoin, the core developers, and the miners. It's sort of a standoff with everyone having their pistols out and pointing them at each other. And so miners don't control Bitcoin, but at the same time, like, if developers or other folks tried to push other initiatives, they might create a hard fork, right? So everyone has to sort of agree together to create a shelling point around a certain code base that everyone agrees to run. And that's what Bitcoin really is. It's a social consensus around code. Like, we all agree to run this version of Bitcoin, not Bitcoin Cash, this version of Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin. And we all agree to run that code. And the miners are like, well, we're going to mine on that chain. And it's sort of this consensus that's made between all these participants, and the devs aren't going to push code that the community doesn't want. And that's where, the whole, I haven't paid as much attention to this as I should have, but with like Taproot activation, there was a lot of like different steps there, because it's really tricky for anyone to make a change to the Bitcoin protocol, because you have these three big parties that play a very important part in how changes are made and promoted. So, that's ultimately how Bitcoin works. I would say is it's sort of this. It's ultimately community led. If the community abandons the code that core developers push and that miners mine, then there is no Bitcoin, right? If they all abandon that, or if there's a new version that everyone agrees upon. So Bitcoin ultimately is the code that people agree upon is Bitcoin, and that social consensus around that. And so any changes to that by miners or core developers that isn't agreed upon by the community would be rejected. So ultimately, Bitcoin is controlled by the community.
Right. Okay, that's fair. Run a node. I get it. If you're listening, run your
Yeah,
fucking node. Even I have one now, so there's no excuse. Okay, but just to add to that, if you were to do a risk analysis of miners and any threats they present to the Bitcoin network, what would you say? What would be in your list? Primary risks.
sure. I mean, the quintessential risk with miners is that they could run a 51% attack. If you controlled 51% of the hash rate, you would be able to start to mess around with the ordering of transactions if you decided to be malicious. Now, Um, the only parties that would do something like this would be governments. Governments would be willing to burn their future cash flows earned in Bitcoin and reorganize transactions and cause, some fear and the price to drop. The only countries that'd be willing to burn that money because you really have to. Basically, the miner game theory works on these miners would only behave inappropriately if they're willing to burn the money. So only state level governments can do that, and it would be to the tune of tens of billions of dollars worth of mining equipment. So that's the biggest risk that miners play is that that a state entity could spend tens of billions of dollars without being noticed to accumulate 51% of the hash rate, then use that for malicious purposes. Um, there could also be a circumstance too where like a mining pool gets hacked. There's all sorts of really cool initiatives being worked on, like by I forget it's Matt from over at Square. He's working on Stratum, which I believe is more like a decentralized mining pool. So I think that a decentralized mining pool definitely mitigates some of the concerns around mining pool hacking. But the primary concern for this primary concern with miners is typically around 51% attacks. The 51% attacks where they could potentially reorganize transactions, but that hasn't happened in Bitcoin yet. And I find that very implausible that it would happen sometime in the near future. So I don't really think that's a major concern that game theory has held up so far over Bitcoin's existence since 2009, since the code launched.
Okay, let me put another couple of things in there. You talked earlier about forking the network. Um, our experience with S2X is that I know we were saved by the UASF, but there is threats, potential risks there if there are disagreements with key consensus changes that they could fork the network, which could disrupt the network for a period of time.
Yeah. Um, there was a tug and pull during Psycho 2X of the community fighting against Jihan Wu and was it Bitmain? Yeah, man, I haven't
Yeah,
heard that name in such a long time.
yeah.
It, it shows you what happens when you try to fight the cyber hornets. You're gonna get burned and you're gonna be kind of pushed out. I mean, Jihan Wu hasn't really made it. He got pushed out of his own company too.
Hmm.
There's essentially a tug and pull where the miners were signaling we want this chain, and the community was like, no, we don't want this. And eventually, the community won. So it was the victory of Bitcoin users in the community over centralized, powerful individuals and corporations. Those corporations had banded together, creating the New York Agreement. New York Agreement was essentially them and the miners and business. So it was the businesses and miners trying to implement a change in the Bitcoin protocol that the community did not want, and the community won. So it very much validates, my previous statement that Bitcoin is owned and run by the community, not businesses, powerful individuals, or miners.
All right, let me put another one at you. Marathon, I think it's marathon mining, OFAC compliant blocks.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have fun
As,
staying poor, then you can do that because if you want to leave revenue on the, and then what's hilarious about that is that um, people found their address and started to send them dirty, tainted
I
coins,
know.
which I
I
thought was
fucking love
hilarious.
Bitcoin. Bitcoiners are brilliant. But let's
Yeah, I
talk
mean,
about that.
yeah,
So if people don't understand, do you want to explain what Marathon is doing?
yeah. So essentially, they're mining. So the block reward, what miners receive in compensation for buying their machine and running electricity through it, is they receive newly minted bitcoins called the subsidy and transaction fees. Now, transaction fees don't represent a majority of the block reward yet, but in the future they will. And so
Hmm.
what Marathon is doing is they're selectively censoring transactions that they would consider to be illicit or from addresses that are listed by OFAC as illicit. Now, the funny part here, though, is like it's such a ridiculous thing to do because one, you leave money on the table and other miners will go pick that up. So have fun staying poor. Two is it's virtue signaling and totally bullshit. Like if what was evidenced after they mined one of these blocks is that they got people with their address. People started to send them tainted coins. So there's no way you can't stop someone from sending you a payment on the Bitcoin network. So
Hmm.
if you're trying to have clean Bitcoin, good luck because some guy in the middle of Iraq or Sudan or whatever can send you $1 of Bitcoin from their address to your address and boom. Boom, now you're technically like tainted or if there's it's really hard to Bitcoin ultimately it doesn't matter if they're tainted or not. I mean, the
Well,
one
they could
Bitcoin is
burn
one
those.
Bitcoin.
They could burn those UTXOs
They
if they
could
wanted.
if they wanted to, but I mean, the fact is like, oh, well, like now you've had these coins touch your wallet and there's all sorts of technical aspects to that of like, is that clean? Is that dirty? I think it's kind of silly to claim that like, oh, these are clean coins and these are dirty coins.
Uh huh. Okay, so really, what you're saying here is that miners essentially play to a perfect free market economic incentive structure.
It's extremely likely that that would be the outcome of this. Now, certainly there could be a more dystopian version of this in the future where miners all collectively decide to censor transactions and then fundamentally Bitcoin would have some major issues there. But we would also have to depend on them not caring about money, which I find to be improbable, especially considering you can run a miner behind Tor. So,
Yeah.
being a Bitcoin miner, you don't necessarily have an identity at all.
Well, also, I guess it depends on jurisdiction as well, and the jurisdictional pressures you would get if you're based in the US. Um, I mean, I actually don't know too much about
Well, the US
OFAC
hasn't asked
compliance,
the US didn't ask Marathon to do this.
so their buck isn't.
Yeah, the Marathon did this on their own accord.
Okay,
Yeah, I know.
that's rather disappointing.
What a very disappointing and bootlicking sort of thing to do. I mean, the whole point of this is not to that we don't do that sort of thing, So if they want to selectively not make money, then sure, I guess.
All right,
But
well,
like,
get fucked, Marathon.
yeah, FinCEN and FinCEN and other regulators didn't ask them to do that.
That's interesting. I just made the well, actually, I suppose so. If they'd have asked them, they would have asked everyone.
Precisely.
So really, it's just a massive virtue signal for no economic benefit and to become the most hated company in mining.
It's antithetical to Bitcoin's entire existence, so I find it very unsavory.
The reason I bring it up, Dan, is trying to I'm trying to imagine the worst case scenario with the mining council. And that's the kind of adversarial nature that I've learned. Especially now I have all my wealth tied up in Bitcoin. It's important for me to think about that. You
Certainly.
know, I'm I'm annoyed at the influence of Elon Musk because he's damaging my wealth when he tweets irresponsibly or tweets bullshit. He's damaging my wealth, and not that I expect the market to go up only. I want the market to naturally do what it does, but I certainly don't want the influence of some um, egotistical, loose cannon, fourth richest guy in the world just tweeting bullshit and it affecting what is my hard earned money. But
Sure.
I'm trying to imagine worst case scenario. And it might sound to more reasonable people that I'm being unreasonable, but I'm wondering if it can potentially, a mining council can lead to some form of regulatory capture, or just by appeasing a single billionaire, because essentially the meeting was held to appease Elon Musk. Okay, Elon Musk has tweeted a bunch of bullshit about Bitcoin energy consumption. And because
Right.
of that, and meetings now been held that he's been invited to, that which by the way, I don't understand why he's had an invite to the meeting, because if you think about it, what gives him the right to be at that table? Because he's Elon Musk? Well,
Yeah.
that's not Bitcoin because we're all equal. Because he holds the most amount of Bitcoin? Well, I actually think that's bullshit because it's not his personal Bitcoin. And then how long's he been in? He's only been in Bitcoin for 5 minutes. Someone like you deserve a seat at the table more. You've been there longer, done more for Bitcoin. But
Sure.
anyway, it's to appease him. And then so where does this lead to? What if Zuckerberg comes in? What if Jeff Bezos come in? Do we suddenly have this council of Bitcoiners who, billionaire Bitcoiners who sit down and agree, well, here's an issue we need to deal with it. What if pressure comes in from the regulators? Okay, we're going to call a meeting. We're going to have Saylor, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg all at a table and say, we're not happy about X. What are you going to do about it? Like, I'm just imagining what is the worst case scenario. And actually, what it made me realize, Dan, is that we actually don't want leading voices in Bitcoin. We don't want people who can drive narrative because then they're people who can be influenced. Rant,
Yeah,
rant,
I mean,
rant.
I think that's where, I've talked about Bitcoin marketing and personal brands and Bitcoin, and we've seen a lot of people like have a kind of negative reaction to that. And I think some of that is seeing these bigger brands like Roger Ver and others be on the wrong side of the debate and try to use their influence to push Bitcoin a certain direction. Um, yeah, I certainly think like, Bitcoin has no gods, no leaders, no kings. So having, semi leaderless would be the ideal world, but we don't live in that world, right? We had Gavin Andreessen and Jeff Garzik and Satoshi, and there's eras of different leaders and Eric Voorhees and Andreas and there's different waves and of leaders that come in and then eventually abandon Bitcoin or try to attack it. Um, I think to be on the right side, I mean, we can still have big leaders and then be good for Bitcoin. I think Jameson Lopp would be a great example. Jameson, I think, has been on the right side of history.
Well,
I think,
actually, he would admit at one point he was a big blocker. I can't remember whether it was a Bitcoin Classic or QT. He originally thought it was a good idea, realized it was wrong, changed his mind, and it's back on.
yeah, I think in that era, people were still exploring it, so
Yeah, of
that
course.
would be fine. It's more of like late 17 on when it became like a civil war. If you're on the wrong side of the battlefield, there, I think you've kind of lost all credibility in the Bitcoin space. Um,
I think it's a credibility that can be recovered if
if they
handled
were
right.
if they were humble, sure. If they
It
came back and said I'm wrong, but I don't think that's going to happen.
God, his name slipped my mind. The Zappo guy from
Oh,
Argentina.
Winces, yeah,
Yeah,
he
Winters.
recovered. Yeah,
Yeah, he totally recovered. He said I was wrong. He apologized. He understood. Um, but so many seem to have kind of lost the battle and refused to come back and say, "Yeah, do you know what? I was wrong." It's kind of interesting. And I mean, I think some of them still believe they're right, and I think others just don't want to admit they're wrong.
certainly. I mean, I don't know how you'd have to have it extraordinarily like be extraordinarily stubborn to believe that you're still right after all this time. But there's certainly individuals that I'm not going to name, but certainly individuals who refuse to look at reality. And they're free to ignore reality as long as they like, and their investment can continue to go down. Yeah, it's funny. Like the someone asked me, like, "Hey Dan, how do you know you're going to be on the right side of history in the future?" Which is I thought was a really interesting question, right? Like, how do you know
Hmm.
if there's another hard fork that you're going to be on the right side of it? Like, what if you're on the wrong side, like some of these guys were? And I actually answered that with a product management sort of
Hmm.
perspective. The protocol solves a problem. At the end of the day, the protocol is solving a problem for humans. And we have to look at what problem it's solving. Now, with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, we knew that Bitcoin wasn't solving the cheap PayPal problem. It was very self evident based on how scaling technology would work. And then also, like, it just, from any sort of basic empathetic customer experience, I mean, you would just know that, like, getting people to go spend it was an incredible challenge of like you not only got transaction fees but exchange fees and volatility fees that were just made it wasn't solving a problem. It was people projecting what they wanted it to be and it wasn't actually being empathetic with their customer. Bitcoin's customer are people trying to store value in a way that's hard to seize and immutable and has a monetary policy that won't be changed. A sound money, right? A gold 2.0. That's Bitcoin's core value prop. So as long as we remember how Bitcoin is solving people's problems, that ultimately, I think, is the guiding light on how we make decisions for where Bitcoin goes. Just like with product decisions, do we build this new feature or not? Is that what the Bitcoin community wants? And will that actually solve a problem? A cheap PayPal is not solving a problem. That was not a problem. That was a made up problem. And if you just spent any time with your customers, you would have realized that. And so that's why that narrative failed, and that's why that use case didn't make its way into Bitcoin because Bitcoin's use case was more around storing value. In the future, there's going to be battles based on like privacy.
Mm.
There might be some other battles based on like Bitcoin DeFi or something. I don't think that one would be as big, but the privacy one I think is probably going to be a future battle.
People have
Um,
said that that's the privacy debate is the next civil war. I've heard that brought up a few times because the kind of things you could be debating about are on chain privacy. That could become a debate. Do you know what I think the thing that makes it kind of interesting is if it's going to lead to a hard fought, then there's certainly a dispute. Is price the futures as soon as possible.
yeah, you talking like price the fork in
Yeah,
futures?
price the
I
fork,
agree.
because that was a great thing with S2X. As soon as the fork was priced, we pretty much did it go up because Bitfinex did it, didn't it? I can't remember if it went up and then straight down, but at one point it was like priced like about 10% of the main fork.
Right. I think futures is a great way to play it. Like it is basically, yeah, go bet on, let the market kind of decide. Now, you could have big whales influence that, but ultimately good luck trying to influence $1 trillion market. I mean, that would take an enormous amount of capital just to signal something. So I'm not sure who would risk
Mm,
that.
it could be a multi-trillion-dollar market by that point as well, Dan. And the
Exactly.
thing is, if you consider Bitcoin as gold 2.0, you want to price with the market.
Yeah.
You don't want to go
It's
against the market.
yeah, you could get crushed. So I think voting based on skin in the game vote's a pretty good way to vote for these sort of things. So that's kind of like it's not like over and done. Then it's just a good way to signal. It's all about signaling, right? Um, I think the privacy one is a kind of an interesting one to think about as privacy becomes a bigger and bigger topic. So I've got a bunch of people coming into my threads, which I'm sure you do too, Monero folks,
The
Zcash
Nerofolks,
folks.
fungibility.
Oh yeah, they're always trying to peddle their whatever they've got, right?
They've been quite loud recently.
Yeah. So what's interesting though is I wrote an article on Bitcoin and privacy in the Held Report, my weekly newsletter, where I dig into this. Where I'm like, okay, what is your gold standard, all puns intended, for fungibility? I'm like, fiat cash, right? We would
Mhm.
all agree fiat cash is pretty damn good with fungibility because it's what drug dealers use in movies. It's what everyone uses, right? Cool. All right. You can move a couple million around pretty easily in cash. It's risky, but it's pretty private. Here's the thing. Okay, go spend it. What's going to happen? You walk into the dealership, 10 cameras record you. There's a title on file that you bought this car, you bought this Lambo, you paid for it with cash, which is recorded. Your name's on it, which is recorded. And then you go buy a house with cash, which is recorded. And it's all recorded, all mapped. And so, yeah, you've technically got fungibility on your day-to-day coffee transactions. Cool, great, great. You can take your dirty money and go spend it on a cup of coffee. But as soon as you make these big purchases, or you buy a TV online, or you buy a TV in person, there's all these cameras at Best Buy that record you. There's receipt data. There's your cell phone's tracking all of this as well. How are you going to hide
And
any of that? Like what?
well, you launder it.
So what do? You create a shell company and move money through it?
You create a car wash, a cash business.
Sure. Okay, so everyone creates their own money laundering scheme.
Well,
So
no, I get the point you're saying, but
yeah,
there are criminals out there who've learned ways to launder money. It's not an impossible
sure.
task.
Oh, of course. All I'm saying is that like this idea that perfect privacy on chain somehow equals freedom is completely ridiculous. Like because all of that money that you have has to go buy something someday, whether it be rent. Sure, if you just stored value in it and you never sold it ever, great. But everyone's got day-to-day expenses, right?
Mhm.
So I find that idea that like perfect privacy, like this perfectly fungible money will equal this freedom is BS on if you never bought anything,
Well,
sure. And then the second one is like, have you ever looked at how many SDKs are within a mobile app? You know how many of those are tracking your your movements? If you Google what's the price of Monero or what's the price of Bitcoin, I'm sure that the NSA has flagged that for sure. Like like if you've made one slip up like that ever, you know, ever once, then they probably got you on a list. So like this idea that like you have this perfectly private money, which then shields you from government action, which is the whole worry, right? Is that governments could, if they can identify folks on chains, they can penalize them. I think it's a little BSy of like, there's no such thing as perfect privacy. You ultimately have to buy something. All of that's recorded. So I don't think that's very practical. Even perfectly private money on chain wouldn't be a practical way to like hide from the government. Now, um, Bitcoin has, so first and foremost, that perfectly private money solves a giant problem. I push back against that narrative because I just don't see that. Also, Bitcoin is still the most used coin on dark markets, which indicates that like Bitcoin is still very much used for those, and people use coin joins, which is a implementation that folks can use to go mix their coins with other people. Now, so I think that Bitcoin with that plus Lightning has good enough privacy, or all puns intended, pretty good privacy. And then I kind of push back on the narrative that Bitcoin needs privacy to ultimately achieve its problem of the problem it's solving of storing value and being a goal 2.0. It's just not really practical. Like,
Well,
I
can I
don't know.
disagree with you here?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, look, I agree with your point in that you will have to buy something and records be created. This, I do agree with that. At the same time, I don't think that's not a reason to desire privacy, because there are other reasons to have privacy. Look, this is, you talked about if you have a large amount of cash, blah blah blah. But let's talk about people in a scenario where they have just honest money that they've earned, and that could be where you are in the world, where I am in the world. That could be in China, that could be in Syria, or wherever. There are certain places where maybe you want to buy certain things you don't want to be tracked. It's like the basis of democracy is that the basis of democracy is that you have privacy, because you don't want influence over your vote, you don't want any threats to your vote, blah blah blah. So I still think and I'll say to people, listen to this. If you go and search up Andreas Antonopoulos privacy, he does a really good presentation on this, talking about the basis of human freedom and democracy. I agree with what you're saying, but I also think privacy is still important and it is desired, because there are
Oh,
certain scenarios, like we're in a blessed position, UK, US. There are people, I think, in other countries who need it more than us.
yeah. So first and foremost, privacy is a human right. I
Yeah.
totally agree. What happens and so in a perfect world, would we have private, like Bitcoin be perfectly private and all these things? Absolutely. I'd love that world, right? It'd be a nice to have. However, it comes with a trade off. And that's where most of the privacy coin folks
Mm,
don't mention this. But the trade off comes in auditability, which means that we don't know for certain if the monetary policy has been tampered with due to an exploit, which has occurred on both Monero, Zcash, and Bitcoin. So
yeah. I don't.
that
I personally don't want that trade off. By the way.
Yeah, and that's where I find it really dishonest that they don't ever bring that up. They're like, "Oh, Bitcoin isn't as fungible as it should be. You should just implement privacy." And I'm like, "Cool." Then we would sacrifice the one thing that makes Bitcoin incredibly trustworthy and valuable, which is the auditability and trustworthiness of the monetary policy. I think that, people don't realize that, like, okay, that's the whole point of Bitcoin, and the problem that it's solving is it's being a good goal 2.0. We can trust in the monetary policy, we can trust in it. And if you add this layer of privacy, I wish there was a perfect trade off where we could add full privacy, but also be able to audit perfectly. And there are ways to kind of go in between that with like turnstiles and whatnot. But basically, the TLDR that I've gotten from all my reading into it is that you have to sacrifice some auditability. And I just don't think it's not solving a big enough problem to trade off the problem it's currently solving for.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about on-chain privacy versus, if I called up Matt Odell and Shinobi, and I said, look, between you, help me solve my privacy problem. I mean, essentially, I'd have to start with a new stack, there's a bunch of things I'd have to do. But I know it's possible, and I think there are going to be tools that come on the front end that make it easier. I know there's work being done that's being funded by the Human Rights Foundation. And I also know with things like Liquid and Lightning that there is uh, better levels of privacy that you can get from those. I'm just going to say, completely gone off track.
We
I
have
just want to
away
go
from
back to the
minors a little
question.
bit.
Yeah, sorry. I want to go back to it because that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. What do you think of the Mining Council? Is it fine? Should we not care? Should we be cautious? Should we try and break it down already? Should we, what is the play that we should be doing here? Because I have had spoken to different people. When I speak to Nick Carter, it's a very different conversation that I had with Shinobi yesterday. Shinobi was like, fuck this. This is about Elon Musk pushing for carbon credits and wanting to sell carbon credits to miners. He might be right, he might be wrong. Where are you with this?
Yeah, great question. So, first and foremost, I respect a lot of like Nick Carter's thoughts on this. I think he's done a great job of defending Bitcoin's narrative from a pure data driven perspective.
Mhm.
I've been a little bit cautious of his approach. Like, and again, I really like Nick a lot, so I don't think him and I are in like a bad disagreement
Hey,
here or
listen,
something. But
if Nick listens to that, he knows we both love him, and he is somebody who
exactly,
accepts there's different opinions. Nick's fine.
yeah, and I think him and I have talked about this before too. So it's not nothing too different than what him and I have talked about. Um, I don't think we should even debate them on Bitcoin's energy mix. I don't have to defend the energy mix of my TV. I don't have to defend the energy mix of my cell phone or my shirt. And if you admit that Bitcoin isn't like if you admit that Bitcoin is dirty or you admit that Bitcoin should be using more green energy, then you're admitting that they're right. And I don't agree that they're right. And I think that we should push back on the narrative that it's even considered wasteful at all or dirty. I think that's a completely ridiculous narrative and a double standard that they have for us. So we have two different ways to fight the FUD, is what I'm trying to say. Is I try to fight
Mhm.
the FUD by undermining the argument in its entirety of going, this is a completely baseless argument. How much energy does watching the Kardashians use? Have you audited that? Have you audited the existing financial system? By doing that, we tackle the core root of the argument. And Nick is more factual based on of looking at the data and going, well, here's the exact numbers. Let's talk about it. But I think that these debaters aren't really interested in real data. They're interested just in their own narrative. And ultimately, they don't like Bitcoin. And any energy usage that Bitcoin has, they will consider to be wasteful. So that's where I just like to undermine the core root of the argument, which is that they don't like Bitcoin. They find any energy consumption wasteful. And it doesn't matter what the green mix would be. If it was 90%, they would claim it's still wasteful and it should be 100%. If it's 100%, then they would claim that the energy should be used elsewhere. So that's where I
Okay.
see kind of a turtles conversation, turtles all the way down to where it's ultimately the bottom of this is like, I'm not going to defend, I'm going to use energy because you use energy and no one criticizes you when you use it. So I'm going to use it as I see fit.
Okay. Well, I'm almost certain in his private life, Elon Musk use far more energy than I do, and we can
He's got
debate. We can
he's got a
look,
private plane. He's got two
dude.
private planes. So I'm
Dude, I
like,
saw you. I saw your troll, man. It killed me. What was it? Can we have the energy mix of your private plane or something?
exactly. I mean, it's just so absurd. Or the energy mix of his Falcon rockets. Like, and by the way, I love SpaceX and I like
Yeah,
Tesla cars.
dude, I
They're
love
great.
it.
He's built some great things in this world. So I don't want to, and I think that he's learning about how Bitcoin works. But to answer your question more directly, um, I first and foremost don't see it as an issue that Bitcoin should be greener. So fundamentally, I don't really agree with the premise of creating like a council for it. What's great about Bitcoin is people can do whatever they want, whether or not they feel that way or not. And so if they want to do that and they want to spend more money sourcing their electricity and not make as much money, they're free to do that. And respect that, and they're free to do what they want. Miners ultimately don't control Bitcoin, so I'm not too concerned. And I think they represent a pretty small percentage of the hash rate. It's also unlikely that they'll continue to accumulate, given that a person like I think Nick's done some analysis and he thinks that the hash rate's not going to move in a linear fashion over the US. It's probably going to be spread across the world. So it's doubtful that the US creates a mining cabal, if you will, or like a
Mhm.
vast majority of the hash rate. So ultimately, it doesn't matter because miners don't control Bitcoin. Two, most of the hash rate isn't going to move to the US. It's going to move all across the world. And three, I find it kind of silly because ESG stuff. I think like certainly there's environmental concerns to be thought through, and pollution is not a great thing. But we all require energy to make the world work. Energy consumption by itself is not a bad or good thing. And ultimately, capitalism is about allocating energy effectively. People want to make money in capitalism, which means they make more efficient things, which means that those things use less electricity or energy in order to produce a value or service or good for a human. So, Bitcoin, I think, does a really phenomenal and very efficient job at doing that. So, I reject the idea that Bitcoin should have to defend its own energy consumption when no one else does.
Well, I've actually got an interesting show coming out tomorrow with Nick Carter and Alex Gladstein discussing Gladstein's article regarding the petrodollar, which is
Oh,
very
cool.
interesting because the part of the thesis, well, the part of the article discusses that the petrodollar has propped up the fossil fuel market by having that relationship with House of Saudi, and therefore harmed the growth and the incentive structures around pushing renewables. Look, cards on the table. People have followed me on Twitter long enough. No, I'm a semi-environmentalist and a hypocritical one in that I care about the environment. I care about overfishing. I care about deforestation. I care about pollution. And I do think we burn too many fossil fuels. I am a believer that there is climate change and it is caused by humans. Like, people are going to write to me or shout at me on Twitter for that. It's the truth. I've done a lot of research. I believe it is. That said, um, I've become a bit more rational about how we solve this. Talking to people like you, listen to people like Marty Bent, and I'm not as far down the rabbit hole as Marty Bent with this, but you know, at the same time, I find the way that Bitcoin is targeted for energy usage as there's a lot of the arguments coming that are quite hypocritical. Like you say, we don't track washing machines, we don't track PlayStations or Christmas trees, blah blah blah. We
Yeah.
just track Bitcoin. But let me put a different argument to you, the one that came out of the spaces. So I would say, and it felt like definitely the more liberal leaning Bitcoin people, the people in the conversation were saying, the thing is, the narrative exists. Whatever we
Sure.
do, the narrative exists. Therefore, forget the fact there's a council. If miners choose to produce essentially, which is a sustainability report or an audit that says this is our energy mix that can actually counter the FUD, that's really useful, because whenever the FUD comes out, you can say, here is the proof. So how do you, like, I've got my opinions on this, but how do you feel about that?
So I'm fully supportive of them trying to use that narrative battling to fight this FUD. And that's where Bitcoin has this decentralized marketing team where I've got my narrative on how to fight the FUD, and Nick has his, and this mining group has theirs. And I applaud any effort to go fight the FUD. So
And
fighting
I
the
tell
FUD is
people to fuck off.
yeah, that's certainly one narrative too that could work. I mean, that's Bitcoin's ultimate message when you try to push against it. Is it's like a glacier. It's just going to crush you. So I think that it's yeah. I mean, I think I don't agree with their method, but I applaud them for trying it, and I certainly hope if that is the successful method that kills this FUD, then I applaud them for it. So that's basically my thoughts on it. Is that I don't think it'll work, but if it does, then that'd be amazing, and I respect their efforts to try, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, right. So you've really, so your issue is with essentially centralizing around an association of sorts. And we know historically the Bitcoin Association was a complete fucking turn up. So what's the
Oh
risk though?
man,
That so what do you, or if you were them, what would you have done? Because I know what I would have done. I
yeah,
said it in the space. I said, why not organize a roundtable, make it public, have it as an open discussion. Don't invite Elon Musk because he's got fuck all to do with the conversation, and bring in some voices who are like someone like yourself, Dan, someone like Nick Carter, someone like Marty Bent, different people around the table to debate it. Because I think consensus would have been reached, and it would have been, just produce your audits. Tesla does a sustainability audit and they publish it on their website. You can do the same, and we can point people to these things.
yeah. I mean, they should have hired a comms person or some PR person to help them craft that narrative, because they came back and they're like, "Look, this is just like a reporting thing. We're not like a cabal." So I think that like Bitcoiners inherently have some PTSD from these previous, the New York Agreement, Bitcoin Foundation. So Bitcoiners are fully justified in feeling that way. So I think that Bitcoiners they're fully justified in being reactionary in this sort of reaction. At the same time, too, you want to make sure you don't have a situation where like your white blood cells kill your white blood cells and they just go into hyperdrive and get all flustered for no reason. Now, I think the response so far has been appropriate to challenge the idea that there's this group, to challenge the idea that we need a group, and challenge the core fundamental reason why it exists. I think that Bitcoiners are justified in that. I'm not saying that's my own personal belief. I'm just saying they're justified in that, right? Like they're justified to go fight control of individuals trying to control Bitcoin. They're totally justified in fighting that. I think they probably could have handled it a little bit better. I think that they could have handled the communication a little bit better, and then I think that ultimately, again, Bitcoin is really hard to change. Like
Yeah.
the group of miners is a
Discuss
pretty.
this with Shinobi today.
I'd be interested to hear a tidbit or two. Maybe that'd be in a second here. So yeah, I don't think that like they don't control a majority of the hash rate. They're not close to a majority of the hash rate. So if they want to go do that sort of thing, they're free to go do it. They're also, I mean, they're free not to earn as much money, right? If they want to source electricity that's more expensive, but it's green. My thing is just that what happens when you do that and Bitcoin's, let's say Bitcoin's 90% green and they still come after us. Like what then? And you spent all this time and effort,
That's what
you
my
know.
worry is, because
Yeah,
I don't think this is ever about
it's it's
it,
not
and they'll move the goalposts. I just think
exactly.
people have an issue with Bitcoin, and I think the root of it for a lot of them, I'm going to just say it, I think it comes from a jealousy. And the reason I think that there are certain journalists. I'm going to call one out specifically, Nathaniel Popper, who, by the way, he won't listen to this, so it doesn't matter. But his book was the first thing I read. Digital Gold was the first
Yeah.
thing I read. I fucking loved that book. Got me into Bitcoin. I was like, this is amazing. And I've seen him over time turn against Bitcoin and then just become a social justice journalist when he started attacking Coinbase, which was totally unnecessary,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Um,
That means
and,
that Bitcoin is still being used for drugs and money laundering despite all of the data showing otherwise, that it uses.
and
Yeah.
I just use that as indicative of somebody who just followed something but didn't invest and has become bitter towards it. And I get it. Look, I've seen it happen to a lot of people. People have become
Yeah.
bitter towards Bitcoin because they traded it badly or they just didn't get in. And I just feel like they're seeing other people get wealthy, and I think they're better. And they keep thinking, "Oh, it's too expensive," and then it comes down. They don't invest in it. And I just think people just want to attack it,
Yep.
and they don't know what they're attacking.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a with journalists, they don't have a good knowledge of the space, so they're fundamentally like they're quoting sources that have been debunked. And I think Nick Carter gets really flustered with this. I'm like, oh, welcome to the party, pal. I've been feeling this way since 2013. Like just flagrantly, like like flagrantly false information. And I'm like, you didn't even read the Wikipedia of Bitcoin back in 2013. I'm like, what the hell? Like, they're like, oh, you can print as many as you want. I'm like, no, you can't. This has been 2 minutes reading about it, and you would know that. Um, so it's been really disappointing being in Bitcoin and having to just see every publication misreport on Bitcoin, not just in a subjective manner, but objectively, like choosing to flagrantly like misuse information and twist it has been supremely disappointing. And so I think that, yeah, some of these folks, some of these journalists will never change. It's not about it's not about the truth. It's about their personal narrative and what they want to craft. I mean, it's very explicit what they care about and what they want. So you've got like the narrative crafting and their stubbornness and their ignorance, but then you also have what gets me clicks. Bitcoin's fine, everything's doing well, Bitcoin's great. That doesn't get you as many clicks as like Bitcoin's destroying the earth, Bitcoin transactions, money laundering, drugs. It's like a CSI show, right? Like, they that gets clicks and that drives revenue for the business, and so they'll always introduce some negativity and variability to Bitcoin to where everyone's like, oh man, there's so much drama going on. Oh, this got Bitcoin died again, Bitcoin fell down, Bitcoin died, or miners are taking over Bitcoin, or all those sort of dramatic things that they could talk about. So I think that I don't think that's going to change. Like that's the thing is like, so, okay, let's say we have 100% green energy, right?
Hmm.
Will they write about the truth? They don't do that now. So why would they do that later? Like they don't write about the truth now in terms of energy mix, in terms of Bitcoin's energy consumption and how it's relative to the rest of the world. They don't write about that truthfully now. So why would they write about it truthfully whenever we do hit 100% renewable energy?
Well, my worry isn't just the moving goalposts on uh, energy mix. My worry is it just moves to something else. It's like it move. Does the debate then move to Bitcoin is used by criminals and terrorists and tax evaders? We need higher levels of KYC. We need these compliant blocks, and these people who sat there with billions of dollars who see that the network reacts and the market reacts to this kind of news suddenly say, well, we need the terrorist council, we need the whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then start to drive the narrative on that because I th- are they protecting billions of dollars? Are they worried about billions of dollars? That's my worry. I don't know if I'm being overpowered. I know a lot of other people think like that, but it's really strange, Dan. It's like I celebrate Sailor. I think he's fucking great, by the way. I'm guarded just in case, but I do think he's a good speaker of Bitcoin. And if it's, if he's only promoting his own asset value growth, fine. But as long as he's a good Bitcoiner, I care.
Sure.
I don't give a fuck about Elon Musk. I don't care because I think SpaceX is awesome. I like some of the Tesla cars, but I think he would do whatever if growth in Tesla or SpaceX came at the cost of Bitcoin, I think he would do it because he has his personal goals, whatever that
Sure.
is. So, but the point I'm trying to get to is that these loud voices now make me nervous.
Totally. Yeah, Bitcoin, like I said before, Bitcoin has had loud voices before that turned against it.
Mm.
A bunch of different individuals from the 13, 14, 15 era and 16, 17 were on the big blocker side. So, I think that it's natural to feel that way because Bitcoin has inherently been let down by its leaders, right? And then the same with the Bitcoin Foundation. Those core developers like Gavin and Jeff, I forget if they were part of the Bitcoin Foundation or not, they turned against Bitcoin as well. So Bitcoiners intuitively feel that they should be wary of these influencers, and I think they should. Um, at the same time, like these individuals don't control Bitcoin. They can prop up their own narratives. They can try to push Bitcoin a certain direction, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Saylor is only so influential. Now with Elon, what sucks the most about Bitcoin is you have to kill all your heroes once you get into it. I think that's
Hmm.
been the most miserable part of Bitcoin for me. Is in 9 years of this, first of all, like now you dislike journalists, you dislike universities because of all the pedigreed folks who spouted stupid
Hmm.
ass shit about blockchain, not Bitcoin, and a bunch of stupid stuff that came from all the top universities. All the journalists misreported on Bitcoin. Then you have politics and government that fundamentally Bitcoin fights against. And then you have the wealthy folks and the thought leaders, and the thought leaders each weigh in on Bitcoin, and you're like, damn it, Nassim Taleb, like,
Oh, so disappointing.
it's so disappointing. And then you have other folks too, and I'm in Silicon Valley, so these are tech leaders all weigh in, and they hate Bitcoin. They're like, oh, Bitcoin's like a MySpace. I'm like, and so I've had to kill literally every single leader ever. And then Elon, I went to the Falcon Heavy launch, the first Falcon Heavy launch in Florida. So like I very much believe that humanity should be a multiplanetary species. Like this is our destiny, is amongst the stars, and he's our best shot at it. So I think that's an incredibly important mission. Bitcoin is, I would say, the number one most important mission, and this would be like number two. So I fully support his mission. I'm a huge fan of what he's doing there. And so it's really disappointing to see him like, he's either treating it as like a joke or he's trolling or he's semi-serious to get like to sell his carbon credits. It was just disappointing where I'm like, hey man, if we came around and fucked around with SpaceX, like you're fucking around with Bitcoin, it would
Whoa,
be
have
really
you seen that?
disappointing, right?
Have you seen that interview with him where he's nearly in tears and he's like, "I wish they would come and visit us and see the work we're doing."
Oh no, I haven't
Like,
seen that.
it's the 60 Minutes interview. It's worth watching. So he gets quite upset in it. Like you can tell he's upset. It looks like his eyes are welling up. He's disappointed because essentially there's an attack on his work. And when
Yeah.
he started attacking Bitcoin, and I was in El Salvador. Like I felt exactly the fucking same. And I'm not building shit. Like my job is to ask questions. Like I have the most basic job ever, but I'm trying to do my part, right? Like whatever shit people give me, I travel the world at my expense and I go and see these projects and I report on them. I went to Guatemala, but I was in El Salvador and I was like, this project, dude, I'm going to take you to El Salvador and go and see what they're doing. Because when I was there,
Yeah.
it was like 10 kids doing local work, getting paid in Bitcoin on Wallet of Satoshi on the Lightning Network. And then like 2 shops accepted Bitcoin. So it's circulated. Because of COVID, I didn't get to go for 18 months. Now it's this whole fucking network. Like you can go on my Twitter. Everywhere you go, they accept Bitcoin. No, actually, they don't just accept Bitcoin. They want your Bitcoin. They're like, can you pay me in Bitcoin? I'm like, I'm not giving you my Bitcoin. I did in the end because I wanted to leave some sats there. And I was
Yeah.
buying fucking cups of coffee with Bitcoin, right? Hilariously. And you've got this center that's now built whereby they're teaching, they're using it as a class to teach people about Bitcoin, but teach people English. You've got the lifeguards being paid for by Bitcoin. You've got this whole thing that's grown. It's like this seed which has grown about Bitcoin. And I'm thinking, you're there, you've been in Bitcoin for 5 fucking minutes, and now you're attacking it. You're promoting an absolute
Yeah.
shittiest of shit coins. You want to cry about? I'm like, you fucking come and visit here. You come and see the lives that are being changed here. Like these people in El Salvador, they're poor. They are poor. Okay, we've got Jack Mallers building strike, which is changing remittance, which is stopping people have to get a bus to go to Western Union to pick up the cash that's come from America, which is having a 30% haircut because of remittance fees. They can sit on their couch, have it sent to their phone, free and instant. Okay, that's on the Lightning Network. There's this whole network being built there that is changing people's lives, and he's fucking around with it. And
Yeah,
the
it's
sad
very
thing is, sorry, Dan, I'm just going to go on a rant. And
yeah.
because I've had a lot of shit for trolling him back. The sad thing is that he can turn around and go to the Bitcoiners and say, listen, I want to know, tell me about what you've learned. Every Bitcoiner is going to put up their hand and say, I'll fucking come. And he could have Adam back come out to him and sit down with him and say, this is what we've gone through in the last 10 years. This is the Civil War. This is the debate on block sizes. This is why big blocks lost. This is why the Lightning Network's important. He could have 10 of the top Bitcoiners sat around the table and explain it to him. Rather than do that, he's just spouting shit on Twitter about Dogecoin and big blocks and transaction fees and single layers, and it's all absolute fucking bullshit, and it's affecting the work of other people. It's pissing me off. I'm sorry to rant, but like just go
Yeah,
fuck yourself.
it's supremely disrespectful. Like,
Mm.
we embraced him with open arms, and all you really had to do was just hodl Bitcoin and, I don't know, not
Shut
trash
the
it.
fuck up.
Yeah, not trash it. Like, if you asked some inquisitive questions that were like good and he wanted to learn, great. But instead, he just kind of trashed it with like it felt very trolly, because it was just so ridiculous. Um, which I don't really understand. I mean, he actually replied to one of my tweets too,
I
where
did. I saw that.
I joked about proof of work wastefulness, where I'm like, it's not wasteful, was the joke. And he thought that was funny. So, and then 2 weeks later, then he complains about proof of work being wasteful. It's just really bizarre. And I don't even know if there's going to be any insight into his actions there, or it's just kind of this random. But it's kind of like, hey, man, we're working on something serious here. Just as much as you consider SpaceX to be like a really important thing for humanity, we consider the same thing with money. And money is the underpinning of all of your efforts and everything else. So it'd be respectful if you at least took the time to learn it, or at least engaged without being super trolly. You've got, I don't know how many millions of followers he has on Twitter.
Nearly 50. Is it
Yeah.
57 million just under?
He's one of the biggest personalities in the world, right? So
Mhm.
it was just very disappointing. And back to my point about killing heroes, Nassim Taleb, him, and others, it's just really disappointing that you have to slay almost all your heroes when you get into Bitcoin, because
Well, I
most of
think
the
something
followers-
else is.
yeah.
I think something else is going on, Dan, because Bitcoin isn't ideal for government, right? We're quite public about we want to end central banking, the cancer of central banking. We want to end the money printing system, which has propped up government after government. His businesses, all of them, survive on an intravenous drip of government subsidies, which is our fucking money. Let's just be honest. We are paying for his businesses through our
Yeah.
fucking money. Let's just be very clear. Elon Musk, you are getting our fucking money to do your businesses. So I think his number one, like if someone turned around to him and said, I imagine said, you could have Bitcoin globally to bring human freedom to the world, or you can achieve your goals with SpaceX and Tesla, I know which one he'll choose. Fine, it's not that I'm holding his hands to the fire. It's just like we know where his priorities are, and yet he's become so influential in the market. I think there's other people who should be far more influential in the market. Adam Back should be far more
Sure.
influential in the market because
Sure.
his number one goal is Bitcoin. His number one goal is human freedom. Jack Mallers, 27-year-old, killing it at the moment. His number one goal is human freedom. His number one goal is Bitcoin. Yet we're all sat here reacting to the tweets of this fucking moron, and he is affecting the work that everyone's doing. Sorry, I'm really on a rant today. I don't normally do this.
No, let it
But
loose.
it just pisses me off when you go around the world and you see the work these people are doing. And the worst thing is when people call him out in this shit, you get all these people going, shut up, leave him alone, stop shouting at him. We need Elon. We should work with him. And do you know what these people are? They're not Bitcoiners. They're shitcoiners who own Bitcoin. Okay? And there's a massive difference because Bitcoiners would chase Elon out of town and say, look, get the fuck out of here. And we would take the 50% market haircut and then rebuild. Shitcoiners who own Bitcoin care about their dollar value now. Don't get me wrong. Look, I'm honest. I love it when my Bitcoin wealth goes up in pound and dollar value. I love it because it increases my purchasing power. But at the same time, if you offer me Elon Musk to fuck off and a 50% haircut, I take it
Sure.
because it's fucking annoying. Sorry. I'm going to have to do like a. I'm really, really sorry. If you're listening, sorry, I'm swearing.
Maybe you should just do a single episode of yourself just ranting about it.
Go,
Then
fuck
you
this,
can
fuck Elon, fuck Nasty. Well,
maybe play
it's
some
just
rock music opener. Just get into it.
look. I can do my podcast, Dan, from in my house and keep my costs down. I go out. I've traveled the world. Every time I go somewhere, pretty much I'm paying for it. I've had a couple of conferences paying my thing. Pays my thing. I'm paying the cost. I'm going here. Not only am I paying the cost, I know the shows I make there don't do very well because people want to hear Willy Woo and Lynn Alden because they care about their personal wealth. But I do it because I care about what we're doing here, what we're building here. It's really, really important. When you go to these countries and you see Bitcoin changing people's life, it's really important. And then you see this dickhead on Twitter going on about Dogecoin, and it's just like the thing is, the worst thing about it is I don't know if he's serious or not. I'm like, does he own Dogecoin?
I don't even know if he owns Dogecoin. I think it's a joke. His statements about Dogecoin, he must know are false. He must.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, Bitcoin is bigger than Elon. Bitcoin is bigger than anyone. So luckily, Elon might have had like a market impact. But what's great is now the market's been like, okay, he's just jerking us around. We don't really care what Elon has to say about Bitcoin anymore. So Bitcoin grows more anti-fragile with these sort of events where these big folks come in and swing around and try to move Bitcoin's price. Well, they're going to lose influence pretty fast, and pretty soon the market doesn't care what they have to say.
Yeah, and they're going to lose potential customers as well because people will be like, "Well, I'm not going to buy a Tesla." A bunch of people cancelled their Cybertruck orders.
Yeah,
in the grand scheme, it doesn't make a difference, but at the same time, it's just interesting.
Yeah, I just don't understand the strategy. But the thing is, it's either trolling or there's some crazy big strategy here that is we're never going to really see or know about that's behind closed doors with him and folks in the government, and he's trying to signal to them that he's on board. I don't know. Who knows?
Or slight defense. It might be, I've read a podcast. He's trying to get us to Mars, build tunnels that connect cities, make energy efficient cars, roll out solar power. He's got a lot in his hands, and he's the fourth richest guy in the world. Everyone wants to talk to him and hang out with him. Perhaps pressure like that does funny things to you, and maybe that's it.
Certainly. I can't imagine what it's like. Not only like building these two companies. In my last newsletter in the health report, I wrote about this of like that Elon built two companies in one of the most government entrenched industries out there. Cars, automobile manufacturing is a 100-year-old industry. He couldn't even sell cars directly to consumers. He had to fight state regulators because they had put up these regulations, right? To that you couldn't sell directly to consumers. You had to have a dealership, which basically entrenched incumbent car manufacturers. So, and then he fought. SpaceX on the rocket side, he fought the Air Force. The Air Force gave a no-bid $10 billion contract to ULA, United Launch Alliance, which is Boeing and Lockheed Martin. No bid. No bid. And so he sued the Air Force and won that they had to like open up bidding on these contracts. So he had to fight against really intense government power. Now, on the flip side, he gets grants from NASA. And then with Tesla, he gets grants for energy, green initiatives. So he's in this weird limbo where that's got to be a really weird feeling to be like, fuck you, I'm going to fight you. And then also like, hey, can I have some money, please? So he's kind of in this weird limbo. And then like, and everyone told him he was wrong with both. The amount of FUD that Tesla and SpaceX had must have been enormous. Some of the biggest FUD, like the FUD we get in Bitcoin is probably equivalent to the FUD he got in SpaceX and Tesla, which is also weird that he would then trash us without thinking about the second order consequences or how he felt, because he's probably felt that way when people, remember when Tesla's caught on fire? Remember when that was the narrative? Like how BS that was? It's like, well, what are all the other cars driving around with? They're driving around with gasoline.
Right? Well, this is why you need to watch the 60 Minutes interview, because he shows a lot of emotion in that. I'll dig it out for you, dude. I'll send it across to you so you can see it. But yeah look, it's tough. Really, really split feelings. It just is. It's just frustrating because you work so
Yeah.
hard.
And he's got, what is it, 50 million Twitter followers? I mean, I can't imagine what that's like. Like, I've got a quarter million, and things are already getting really crazy. I mean, you and I have talked about this, and maybe
Dude,
this is the right time to bring it up because this might give people some visibility into, like, Elon's psychology when you take this number and, what is it, 100x it, 200x it. So, you and I get a lot of negativity. So,
loads, man.
there's a lot of, I would say it's like 60% praise, 40% negativity. Just depends on the day, depends on the topic, but it's pretty
Yeah,
bad. Like, I block 100 people a day. Like,
yeah.
it's
I
it's
don't know
really
the
bad.
numbers. I block around 100 people a day. My block rule is very specific. You can criticize the fuck out of me,
Sure.
but if you are just abusively insulting, you're blocked. It's just, or if you're spamming, but
Yeah, spamming is a common one. There's so much spam where people come and
it's
try to show a
gross, man.
coin in there.
Yeah. But I had on the back of the market dump, I had people blaming me, and it's not like one or two, hundreds.
Yeah, and they all pile in.
My DMs were get a rope and kill yourself. Why don't you die? I'm slitting my wrists. I've lost all my money. It's all your fault. Go fuck yourself, you fat cunt. Like,
Yep.
just continual abuse, and it's not fun. And I've been through Elon's replies, and he's getting 50 million times that.
Yeah, what's I think the most unfortunate thing that I don't like either is that, um, sure, there's people on different like with different altcoins that don't like me for good reason because I only like
Hmm.
Bitcoin.
Yep.
And then there's traditional financial folks who don't like me because I like Bitcoin. But what really sucks is when Bitcoiners don't like you because you don't like a very specific thing that they want, or they think I'm too commercial or something. They're like, "Oh, he wears a button-up shirt and he's not." I'm like, I believe in all the same values you believe in. I just feel like being a marketer. And there's nothing wrong with that. So the friendly fire, I think, is probably the most uh, really the really disappointing part. And I think that's where Elon touched on that made it really disappointing was that it was friendly fire. Like we thought he was on the same side,
Hmm.
and then it was friendly fire. If Elon didn't like Bitcoin and hadn't bought Bitcoin and then came in and fudded it, we'd be like, okay, whatever, we're used to that. But when it's friendly fire, I think that's when it hurts the most because you're like, wait, I thought we were on the same side, and now you're turning your gun on me. So on my own personal brand, like it definitely sucks when like a lot of Bitcoiners are super mean and will just be super negative for no reason, really trolly. And I see that with you too, you and I
Hmm.
and others. I find it was really unnecessary. It's like, hey man, we're fighting the same enemy here. That's kind of nuts. And then with Elon, it's like, what are you doing, man? Like I thought we
Well,
were on the same side of fighting fiat, and now you're trolling us.
well, he's got more. There's more reason to criticize Dogecoin than Bitcoin. Like 1,000 times more reasons to criticize Dogecoin than Bitcoin. Like endless reasons. But he
Yeah.
doesn't criticize Dogecoin. He promotes it, and he thinks it's fun, but he's
Yeah. He
actually
thinks,
causing problems.
well, this is what I was thinking about too. What is fun at that level? Like you've defeated the automobile industry, you've defeated the space industry, like two like god industries that were like
You've married a pop
undefeatable.
star, or you're dating a pop
Married a
star.
pop star. He's had like three wives or whatever. Like you have
You're
infinity
endlessly
money.
rich.
What do you do? What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
And it's like make SpaceX happen as part of it. But then also, I don't know, maybe he finds this entertaining. Like this is a weird
Well,
form of
look,
entertainment for him.
Dan, I'm a bit of a troll, as you know. Um, uh, I tell you why I went a bit trolly. It was a reaction to the aggressive insults. I found like when I put an opinion across, and it's wrong sometimes. I get that right, but the aggressive insults were a bit much. So I started trolling because I felt like trolling is satire, and if you're insulting satire, you need to get a grip because
Yeah,
comedy makes the world go round.
totally.
Um, I just found it a lot easier to cope with Twitter. Yeah, just being satirical. Like some of the Americans don't get it because the British satire is very different. That for me was like it was like a Twitter coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's Twitter's a rough I mean, it's like imagine you're in like a loud room and anyone can shout at you, right? And
Yeah.
you know, it gets kind of nuts. Especially when you touch a controversial topic, people are going to be polarized. I mean, my tweet that Elon replied to got 35,000 likes.
Wow.
Dude, on the flip side of that, so the day started off really badly. So some of these, and this is probably why Elon saw it, some of these really left wing radical environmentalists got a hold of the tweet, and some really big accounts like CNBC producers with 1 million Twitter followers retweeted it with some nasty comments. Then all of a sudden, like, I mean, we're talking, I've never seen a pile-on like this before. 35,000 is the most likes I've ever gotten on a tweet, but I think I had thousands and like 5,000 replies. I mean, a lot of these were like really, really negative, and it was happening so fast I couldn't even block it. It was happening so fast. And then Elon piles in. That was actually like the day started out really poorly, and then Elon came in with a laugh, and I was like, "Oh, at least I got that." But and this was before he fudded Bitcoin, but it was insane. This was the first mainstream level I've gotten to. Like 35,000 likes is like that's like a mainstream tweet. Um, it was just really insane to feel the hate, and people
Yeah.
just like constantly delete your account. You're a fucking idiot. You're a
It was
terrible
rough,
person.
man.
And then
Yeah.
they would CC Kraken. They'd be like, "At Kraken, you should fire this guy."
Oh, I've had that shit,
So,
dude.
like,
Yeah. Why are you
luckily
sponsoring that guy?
yeah, yeah, so it was intense. And
Twitter can
so
be
that was
rough, man.
yeah,
And if you show any form of it getting to you, if you're like,
right.
God, it's been rough today, it's like you're a fucking snowflake. But usually it's from somebody, and this isn't me being arrogant and saying, but I'm just saying, usually it's from somebody with like 50 followers. And I've said this before, when the internet comes after you, if you've never had that, you don't know what that's like. When you've had
Yeah,
thousands of messages over a week, you're fat, you're a cuck, go kill yourself. I'm sorry. I think even the most badass, toughest person would be like, this sucks. This
totally.
fucking sucks.
It's a whole different way to experience Bitcoin, and it really, really sucks. I would
You have
say,
to
like
you have to find a shield. You have to find a way of dealing with it.
yeah, for me, it's just instant hide and block, which
Yeah.
I have collateral damage. Once a week, someone's like, "Hey, you blocked me," and I'm like, "Sorry." It just if I think it's at all in the realm of like trolly or being insulting, then I'm going to block.
Mm.
I reached out to Andreas Antonopoulos when I first started to grow an audience size, and I've known Andreas since 2013. We worked together at blockchain.com.
Do you know
Um,
why I'm laughing? I think I had the same conversation with Andreas. I had it with him in Uruguay at the La BitConf. Tell me, I bet it's the same
oh,
conversation.
nice. I I don't necessarily agree with how Andreas thinks about the space, but we mutually agree to disagree, and we have a respectful relationship there. And I talked to him about my mental struggles, like dealing with the amount of negativity, and he helped kind of help me think through it. Part of it was he's like, look, back in the tribal world, you would be amongst your tribe, and if your tribe was shouting at you, "Don't do this," if you did that, and then you got kicked out of the tribe, you'd be in a really bad spot. But we're not in a tribe anymore; we're in the world, and but anyone can come yell at us. So when we receive that information, we're like, "Oh, this is a bad thing if I don't correct this," or like, "Oh, I could be kicked out of the tribe," and that's why you have this pit of doubt in your stomach of like, "Oh man, this doesn't feel good." Um, and that plus like he's like, "Look, with any great effort, you're going to have negativity. With anyone who's ever done anything great, there's been a mountain of negativity, right? I mean, anything in life, any fighter, any invention, any book writer, anything comes with negativity, and it's just part of the game. It's just part of what comes with it. It's not a personal thing. People are just people. You just have to like let it pass through you, not into you. And I also, I've had two other folks in the crypto space reach out. Like I reached out to them because I saw some of them struggling and posting tweets that showed me that they were having the same issues that I had, and I tried to pass the ball forward, or what is it called, pass the buck forward or whatever, where I tried to help boost them in a time of need because they were getting piled on, and it's a lot to take in. I mean, look, I won state and high school football, and I played 7 years of high school football, or seven. Sorry, was it 3 years of middle school and 4 years of high school? It was extremely grueling to win state in Texas. Like the amount of verbal and physical things that they bring you through is excruciating. We had guys go into the army afterwards in the Navy, and they said that basic training was easier than our football off season and our training because we would go play for 3 hours and exercise for 3 hours in 110-degree heat. in Texas with no shade. Like, and the amount of, you're hitting really strong dudes like incessantly over and over and over again, and you're suffering a lot of like verbal and mental abuse by the coaches. Like this was not a walk in the park. I would consider like this is equivalently, like I would say equivalently rough. And that was, I would consider, I think a rewarding experience. It taught me a lot,
Mm,
but also a very grueling one.
I feel like a hypocrite now because I, yeah, I guess if I'm posting an image to Elon Musk saying "Don't be a dick," I'm being a hypocrite, which is one of those things where uh, I think sometimes you have to self-reflect. You have to go, okay, if I'm complaining, do I do it myself? Therefore, am I being a hypocrite? Therefore, it's like that. Have you ever read that book, The Four Agreements?
I think you sent that to me because
Yeah,
we were talking about it, where
it's really
it
good.
kind of, yeah, it mentally helps you kind of think through these things.
Well, one of the things is be impeccable with your word. And I'm pretty good at that, apart from when I'm on Twitter. I'm a dick on Twitter. I'm not impeccable with my word, and perhaps that's something I need to think about. It's funny that we started with the mining council, and this has become like a counseling session. It's like therapy with
Well,
Dan.
I think it's interesting for some folks because they probably don't think through what it's like to be at this sort of level. Like it's a little peek behind
Yeah,
the curtain, if you will, of like
people.
it feels douchey to even say it that way, but you know
Yeah,
what I
I
mean. Like
know, I
people
know,
with a
I know what you
large,
mean.
yeah, large following, and I think you like to touch the electric rod. I think more than most people, which
It's because I'm a
you really like to
psychopath.
lean in. Yeah, so you receive, I think, a level of negativity I don't even see. So I respect that a lot.
Well, that's because I've managed to piss off Bitcoiners and shitcoiners at the same time, so I get it in both
You and
directions.
Udi. Have
Yeah.
you've had Udi on the show, right?
Yeah, I have, of course. Well, if the thing is, if you choose to be a troll, um, uh, I think trolling is satire, and I think done in the right way is good.
Yeah,
Like
I
when
think
I'm always,
Niraj, Eric
yeah,
Wall, Niraj, Udi, you guys do it in I think a tasteful and funny way.
yeah, but the different ways. Niraj does it in a way that's very hard to dislike. He's such a nice person, whereas I know mine. I'm a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
But I think it's satire sometimes, and that's fine. But I also know it sometimes. I definitely get it wrong. I mean, I say to my audio engineer and my producer Ben, I'm like, you got to watch this because I don't know if I'm going too far, and you have to tell me because I don't want to go too far. So I get them to like just keep an eye on me. I know what's going to happen. People are going to listen to this interview and go, "Oh, I love the first hour." Then you started fucking talking
Then
about yourself, you
started
dicks.
ranting.
Yeah, it's all about you in the end. Listen, look,
Well,
we could
yeah.
go on. Go on. Sorry, I
Yeah,
was interrupting
yeah.
you.
No, I think that's a good point to kind of wrap up on. I think
Yeah.
that yeah, it's interesting. I think part of this was about big Elon's psychology, right? So what is Elon feeling when Bitcoiners pile in? Is Elon trolling? Maybe this is a level of fun that he finds.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to know, and we may not know forever, but we may know in the future. But I think the part of this exercise was us dissecting how Elon thinks, and I think our own subjective experiences weighed in on that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Bit of a reflection time anyway. Listen, Dan, you know I love you, bro. Can't wait to see you next week. It's been a long time, man. We used to get to drink
Forever.
all the time. I say this in the Veet show, but like we're getting closer. We're gonna go and have some whiskeys,
Yeah.
talk about Bitcoin, talk about some other shit, talk about life, talk about maybe both of us ended up in Austin somehow.
I hope so, man. It's dude, I
Yeah.
can't wait. I can't wait. I think it's been way too long. I think Bitcoin community in person is critical. I
Yeah.
think people have gotten really kind of, tired and a little bit aggressive without being able to meet each other in person and having a beer and shaking their hands and everything else. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time.
Me too, man. Listen, tell people where to find your stuff, to sign up to your newsletter, all that stuff. I will stick it in the show notes, but let them know.
Yeah, if you're on Twitter, follow me at Dan Held. If you like this conversation, minus the mental walk through how we both feel about followers online,
Or therapy.
our therapy session. If you like my thoughts on Bitcoin, my longer form content is on the Held Report. And so if you Google that, if you sign up for the paid subscription, you get my thoughts once a week. If you're on the free one, you get it once a month. So yeah, if you really love my thoughts, you want to go in further, you want to hear me talk long form about these, and I write about a different topic every single week, sign up there.
Awesome, man. All right, brother. I will see you very soon. Can't wait to have a whiskey with you, man. Take care, brother. And I will see you in Miami.
See you in a couple days. Cheers.